Welcome to my channel. Uh, I attempted to go live Sunday. I had a lot of technical issues and it didn't go so well. So instead, I decided to make a video about Halloween. It's one of the oldest history holidays of the history. I mean, it dates back to the Celtics. Uh, Anyways, it dates back 2,000 years to a festival known as Shanghai. It was held at the end of October and marked the end of harvest season and the beginning of winter. They, the subjects say, they kind of believe that the day between the living and the dead overlapped and the dead returned to the earth. Fearing the dead, they would wear costumes and masks to make the spirits happy. Um, One day, part of their celebration was one day they would honor the Pomona, Roman goddess of fruit and trees, as a symbol. This goddess is the apple. It is common. They thought of this is where bobbing for apples had come from. 609 AD, our Martyrs' Day is the day honor our saints. It became the tradition in the Roman Church. In 1000 AD, the Roman Church dedicated November 2nd as All Souls Day in honor of the dead. This day was celebrated with dressing up as the devil, angels, saint costumes, and had bonfires and parades. The tradition of the so called trick or treating has its beginnings in the 3-day event called the Hallowtide. Hallowtide. Anyways, there were 3 days span: All Saints Day, All Souls Day, which they would dress in black to mourn the dead. They also began the practice of souling, in which peasants would go to door begging for food and treats given out in memory of the dead. In the 1600s, Halloween is banned by the Puritans of New England because they considered it a Catholic holiday. Then, for the next 200 years, Halloween is celebrated primarily by Catholics, and it's I can't even. I'm not going to say that. Can't even pronounce it. History of Halloween, the 1700s. Many of the traditions still associated with holiday day began to develop. Celebrations began to dress up to door singing for treats. Turnips were turned into lanterns, and tricks were frequently played on others to imitate the hijinks of evil spirits. So the first pumpkins were not actually pumpkins. That didn't come till later. They would carve out potatoes or turnips. Late 1800s, Irish and the Scottish immigrants fleeing the Irish potato famine arrived to America and bring with them the holiday traditions, making this celebration more popular. So it was the Irish actually, it's a hot Irish holiday, really. They brought it to America and we kind of adopted it. Early 1900s, Halloween becomes more singular holiday with the focus taken away from witchcraft and ghosts and instead placed on family friend get togethers, parties, and parades. History of Halloween 1921, the first officially sanctioned Halloween celebration, is held in Minnesota. Over the next several years, more cities began to follow suit. 1930s, costumes began to appear in shops, this making Halloween a truly mainstream money making holiday. History of Halloween 1966, Charlie Brown gets more tricks than treats in the ironic Halloween cartoon, The Great Pumpkin. Oh, Halloween history through the Middle Ages. By this point, you probably wondering how the Catholic celebration got so spooky. Sure, there's a whole component of celebrating the dead saints, but does it really answer the question? Let's take a leap forward to the 1930s. In Europe, we were witness to the rise of the popularity of All Hallows Eve, which is October 31st. The new name for Halloween, All Hallows Day, November 1st, and All Souls Day, November 2nd. Meanwhile, on the yet under in America, were holding their own Honor of the Dead festival. This festival will eventually develop, and nowadays, as we know, as a Dia de los whatever, celebrated across Mexico and even in some parts of the U.S. Mexican children might have asked for tiny skulls instead of candy, but who are we to judge? All Hallows Eve celebration came to America on the pilgrim ships from, or like I said, and over time it began to merge into native customs during the 1600s and throughout the 1690s. A sparkling society regarding witchcraft practices grew into full-on raging fear. This fear swept through the new continent and commonized with its Salem witch trials. Um, the two final pieces of the puzzle are, if you prefer, nails in the coffin, namely the jack o' lantern, the first Halloween costumes, ghosts covered in white bed sheets, were added in the 1800s. Jack o' lanterns come from the Irish folktale about a fellow named Stingy Jack who tried to cheat the devil and was cursed for eternity to wander the earth with only a carved turnip for guidance. White bed sheets are actually burial shrouds, and they stem from artistic trend between the 1750s and 1850s. Uh, in America, the actual celebration was not recorded until the 1840s, when many Scottish and Irish people immigrated to the United States. As early as 1875, many people, other than the Irish, the Scottish immigrants, reportedly celebrated Halloween. In the U.S., one of the first traditions is a jack o' lantern. So the typical jack o' lantern we know today with the pumpkin didn't really begin to 1875. Uh, how candy came involved in be given out to children prior to that, toys, cakes, those type of things were passed out, but that was expensive. Um, Candy manufacturers began to make candy. Okay. Because the history of trick or treating, they were borrowed from Europe. Americans began to dress up in costumes and go house to house for food or money, a practice that became today's trick or treat tradition. Young women believed that on Halloween, the divine name or appearance of their future husband by doing tricks and yarn, apple parings, or mirrors. In the 1800s, there was a move in America to mold Halloween into a holiday about community and neighbors, and that people just coming together. Then about ghosts, pranks, and witchcraft. At the turn of the century, Halloween parties for both children and adults became a more common way to celebrate the day. Um, People started giving out candy instead of, because they used to give what they called um, cakes. Soul cakes was occurred, and which was encouraged by the church as a way to replace the ancient practice of leaving food and wine for roaming spirits. The practice was referred to as going souling. Was eventually taken up by the children, and they would visit the houses in their neighborhood and be given ale, food, and money. The tradition of this had both European and Celtic roots. 100 years ago, winter was uncertain, frightening time, food supplies were often low, and for many people afraid of the dark, the short days of winter were full of constant worry. On Halloween, when it was believed ghosts came back to the earthly world, people thought they would encounter ghosts as they left their homes. To avoid being recognized by the ghosts, people would put masks. This is where we get the masks from. After dark, so the ghosts would mistake them for fellow spirits. On Halloween, to keep ghosts away from their houses, people would place bowls of food outside their homes, which I think cats and goose Halloween. Well, we don't need it. Okay, so they began to make give candy, but the problem they were unwrapped. Parents feared that they would get tainted. That's when the manufacturers came out with wrapped candy. Now, um, the uh, traditional candies include Hershey's, Kit Kats, and of course the candy corn. Now, many believe some woman made it in her house, and that's how it got started. It didn't. It was actually made by okay, hold on, folks. Okay, the candy came about in the 1800s. Halloween, the candy corn is perhaps one of the oldest Halloween candies still eaten today, dating back to the 1800s. It was first reportedly invented by George Reiner, a candy maker at the Philadelphia Candy Company. It was not made by some woman in her house. And some of the other candies that they would give out is Kit Kat, um, Hershey's candy bar. It was an inexpensive way to give out candy. So that's kind of the brief history. The next video I do on Halloween, I will be going over Oh, wait a minute. How did apples and nuts were major treats also, which I discussed a little bit earlier. Oh, although candy apples are now a popular treat during Halloween season, apples had a much more pathetic and menacing purpose almost 200 years ago. In the mid 19th century, many holiday celebrations involved apple bobbing. A tub filled with water and apples, and players would try to catch one another with their teeth. Young unmarried people would compete to be the first to bite an apple, which signaled they would be the next to be allowed to marry. You know what? I think this should be an, like I said, but George Rayner, a candy maker and original candy company. In 1900, the Colette's Candy Company began making it in large quantities. Candy corn was designed to look like chicken feed, since at the time candy corn first emerged, about half the makers worked in farms. In fact, when it first came out, it was called chicken feed, and the packaging would have a picture of a rooster or chicken. Its name was, of course, later changed to what we know it as today. In the next video, I'm going to actually break it down further and some of the uh, traditions of around the world, different ways it's celebrated. I'll do a video on how what were the first candy given out for Halloween. But I just gave you a simple timeline. And like I said, it was started to celebrate a festival for the end of harvest to signal between summer and winter. But it did have undertones of ghosts and goblins and. But the Catholic Church, of course, changed that concept, as I stated. And anyways, this is a brief review, and I will catch you later. You all have a good day. Bye bye.